RetroDaze.
There was a time before required readings, academic essays, and homework when books still held sway over our young imaginations. For a lucky few, this magic never dissipates, but for the rest of us, we move on to movies and television as the main purveyors of storytelling. When we were still young and impressionable, our elementary schools did their best to introduce the wonderful world of literature, hoping to transform us into lifelong readers. Now, whether or not the tricky magic worked, the yearly book fair was an event everyone looked forward to.
If you listen closely, you might even hear the far-off rumbling sound of metal shelving being wheeled into the gymnasium. Before long, the announcement will come over the loudspeakers, and we'll be let out of class early. Everyone get into a single file line and walk in an organized fashion because we're going to the book fair. Though there were various small book fairs through the 50s, 60s, and 70s, the book fair as we know it really didn't begin until 81 or 82, depending on the source, when Scholastic bought out California school book fairs and began holding their own events. Many of us have only ever known Scholastic book fairs, though there were at least two other big companies in the game: Educational Reading Service Book Fairs, Inc. and Book Fairs Services. In a 1984 New York Times article, Edwin McDowell cited a combined 10,000 events per year. In addition, at least in the 80s, another 30 regional outfits ran their own events. As for the Scholastic book fairs of old, they were often sponsored by school librarians and parent-teacher associations and would bring in volunteers to help set up and work as cashiers during the event. Scholastic was mainly in charge of transporting the books and displays to the schools and then coming back to gather unsold items. In that same 1984 article, McDowell lists the price range of items as 75 cents to $3.95, which was likely true through the 80s, with the expected inflation as years progressed. In nearly every major article about book fairs, there's always a certain amount of skepticism regarding the fine line between the business aspects of the event versus the educational benefits to students. Schools used to make 20 to 33% of the gross sales, a far cry from the 100% profit of something like a bake sale, but was often cited as one of the best ways to encourage kids not only to read, but to find a modicum of independence in their searching for reading material that inspired them. Let's travel back to our stuffy elementary school classroom. It's a Monday, which usually feels hopeless and never-ending, with each tick of the second hand being countered with a tick going in reverse. But this Monday is different. This Monday feels like the half day before Thanksgiving, or the last day of school before summer. You look around the room at your classmates who are all fidgeting and checking their watches or the big round clock on the wall. Even the teacher appears impatient, and we all know why. It's the first day of the school book fair, which often ran for multiple days, and each class had a scheduled time to leave class early and browse the endless wonderment that had been wheeled in and stacked high. Finally, the clock hands move to their necessary stations and Mrs. Franklin abandons her chalk. She smiles wide. Line up in a single file line next to the door, no running. We all do our very best to speed walk to the wall and get into position, while the teacher makes a show of counting heads and inspecting desks. Everyone has their money, now keep it safe in your pockets until you're ready to check out. Mrs. Franklin leads us into the hallway where a few other classes are doing the same. There's a nervous energy. Giggles and whispers can be clearly heard, but the teachers don't shush us. No, this wasn't a fire drill, it was book fair day. Entering the gymnasium, our eyes boggle at the transformation. There are a series of giant clamshell shelving units in a big circle filled to the brim with books. There are tables and displays of other items as well, and a makeshift register where we would pay. Walking closer, the next thing to hit us is the wonderful aroma of brand new print books and magazines. It didn't smell old and musty like the library, but more akin to the bookstore at the mall. Mrs. Franklin says, "You have until the end of the period," and shoos us into the fair, leaving us to our own devices. If Scholastic ran your book fair, then a vast majority of the books offered were published by them as well. This could have been a bad thing, but with such classic series as Goosebumps, The Babysitter's Club, The Magic School Bus, Clifford the Big Red Dog, Teen Witch, and Junior High, there wasn't much to complain about. For many of us, this was the place we first discovered horror. Goosebumps by R.L. Stine is the enduring series of scary stories that most think of when reminiscing about the book fair. After all, it was specifically a Scholastic book and so featured heavily at the event. Of course, the first of the series, Welcome to Dead House, wasn't released until 1992, so those of us who had our book fairs in the 80s were out of luck. Well, not completely out of luck, because you probably had access to the Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark series, which was filled with incredible drawings and stories to fill your young heart with dread. The first in the series came out in 1981 and had such classics as The Big Toe, The Haunted House, and The Thing. Another less often discussed classic series was The Scariest Stories You've Ever Heard. This collection of 3 books, released in 88, 89, and 1990, contained tales of the campfire story and urban legend variety, and unfortunately have no illustrations on the interior. Many of the stories in these books would be familiar to any horror lover, like The Horrible Hook and The Horror in the Back Seat. Besides scary stories, there were plenty of other genres too. A prominent section contained classic literature, if you were into that sort of thing. Personally, the closest I ever ventured was The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, but the more bookish among our classmates may have appreciated the likes of John Steinbeck and Mark Twain. Another favorite section contained interactive books like Mad Libs, crossword puzzles, joke books, coloring books, and the absolute champion of book fairs across the country, sticker books. Oh, baby, did those tiny square books pack a punch. Right on the cover with a little rainbow, they'd say, 12 collector stickers inside. And for lots of us, that would have been enough. But the subject was always the real kicker. Mr. T, dinosaurs, sharks, Whisper the Winged Unicorn, skateboard action, Ghostbusters, The Karate Kid, Misty the Mermaid. The catalog was endless. The first page held the stickers, and the rest of the book presented a full-page picture next to some text on the opposing page. I enjoyed these books so much that I'd continue to flip through them endlessly, even after all the stickers had been stuck. Sadly, many of these books did scam you by producing doubles of the stickers, meaning of the 12, you really only had 6 unique designs. Don't waste too much time perusing the sticker books though, because there are still Choose Your Own Adventure books, Garfield comic collections, movie novelizations with color pictures in the middle, the American Girl book series, Junie B. Jones, and entire shelves containing books featuring horses like Black Beauty and the Saddle Club. There was also always that one kid who had enough money to buy that giant Guinness Book of World Records. And the rest of us fell into 2 categories. The kids who huddled around as they flipped through the book reading passages out loud, and the kids who pretended we weren't listening, but totally were. It may have been a book fair, but we all know it wasn't only about the books. Every event had numerous displays featuring all kinds of exciting ephemera. Bookmarks were a fun extra to add to that pile of books. The choices ranged from jet planes and race cars to horses and unicorns. Bookmarks could also feature characters from favorite books, colorful designs, or motivational messages. The fancy ones had the little tassel or colored piece of string tied through a hole punch at the top, tempting us with the extra bit of flair. The posters were another big seller, often split into 2 major categories of fast cars or horses. All the boys gravitated to the black poster with a blazing red Lamborghini or Ferrari plastered to the center, and the girls would hover around the posters of horses galloping across a field. Of course, there were other options. I'm sure I remember Clifford the Big Red Dog, Garfield, and probably other book-related posters. But let's be real, it was all about the horses and cars. Eventually, your eyes would turn to the piles of fruit-scented erasers. All the different shapes, sizes, and colors to choose from made it like a mini expedition. Surrounding the erasers were special pencils and pens with different toppers on them, boasting a variety of novelty features. A favorite of these was the rainbow pen that came with a variety of colored inks, and you'd have to press down the color you wanted to select. Triangle pencil grips, notepads, novelty pencil sharpeners, keychains, stickers, magnets, plush toys, and so much more were available to peruse and purchase, making us feel more mature than our limited years on Earth should have allowed for. Though this was past my time, into the 1990s as technology advanced, book fairs began to include audiobooks, cassette tapes, CDs, videos featuring adaptations of popular books or educational content, and in some cases, even video games. Finally, one of the favorite elements of the book fair was getting to take home the Scholastic catalog, with filled pages of books and merchandise in vibrant color. For many of us, this very well may have been the only thing we had to take home. If our parents couldn't afford to fork over any extra money, then we were left perusing the bounty of goods and watching luckier kids buy big stacks of books while we only had money for a smelly eraser, or perhaps nothing at all. Still, that did leave the catalog, which on the one hand could potentially be a reminder of all the stuff we couldn't buy, but on the other could act like a smaller Sears wish book. We'd hide it away in our room, circling all the items we would have loved to buy. Somehow, strangely, hopefully, the book fair would still stand out in your memory as something magical and perhaps urge you to take a trip to the library later in the week.
Some say it's hard to feel nostalgic about something that still goes on today, but while it's true that book fairs are still held, I'd argue that as the years progress and the merchandise changes, so does nostalgia grow. There was something specific and particular about the book fairs of our youth that the new ones will never replicate. And yet, it brings me such great joy to know that the kids of today are forming their own connections and memories with the magical book fair. So, how'd we do? With something as personal as a child's first independent shopping experience, I'm sure we missed a few key items. Help us by recalling some of your favorite book fair purchases. I would love to hear about it down in the comments, and if you enjoy our content, please consider liking this video, subscribing to the channel, and maybe even activating that ubiquitous notification bell. It really does make a huge difference. Let's meet again next week to celebrate yesteryear right here on RetroDaze.
Clicky clacky.